The morning mist clung to the Norfolk countryside like a shroud as groundskeepers discovered the freshly turned earth beneath the ancient oak grove. Blood-darkened feathers scattered across the manicured lawn told their own tale, while the acrid scent of gunpowder still lingered in the crisp December air. Security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned during the night, their lenses fogged with condensation that seemed almost deliberate. The ornate wrought iron gates bore fresh scratches, as if something, or someone, had clawed desperately at the metal in the darkness. What the staff found that Christmas morning in 1987 would remain buried in royal archives for decades, another secret swallowed by the vast estate that had harbored the Windsor family's darkest indulgences for over a century. Was Sandringham House a cherished family retreat, or had it become something far more sinister? The financial architecture of Sandringham had been built upon foundations that would make even the most hardened aristocrats uncomfortable. In the gray winter of 1862, Prince Albert Edward's representatives descended upon Norfolk like carrion birds, armed with leather portfolios and an imperial mandate that brooked no resistance. The future King Edward VII had set his sights on creating the ultimate royal playground, but the land he coveted was already home to 17 tenant farming families, whose bloodlines stretched back through centuries of Norfolk soil. The displacement began with deceptively polite letters delivered by stern-faced solicitors who arrived in black carriages that seemed to absorb the pale morning light. Each envelope bore the royal seal, transforming what should have been business negotiations into royal commands cloaked in legal formality. The Whitmore family, whose ancestors had worked the same fields since the Norman conquest, received an offer of £3 per acre for land that neighboring estates valued at nearly 20. When Patriarch Thomas Whitmore questioned the valuation, he was curtly informed that the prince's generosity was not subject to negotiation. The tactics employed by the royal agents revealed a sophisticated understanding of rural vulnerability. They targeted families during harvest season, when cash flow was tightest and the prospect of immediate payment most tempting. Those who hesitated found themselves facing sudden demands from creditors who had previously been patient, or discovered that their traditional access to common lands had been mysteriously revoked. The Hendersons, who farmed the richest parcels near what would become the main house, watched helplessly as their water rights were challenged in courts where royal influence carried more weight than centuries of precedent. Margaret Thornfield, whose husband had died the previous spring, leaving her to manage 40 acres alone, became a particular target of the acquisition campaign. Royal representatives visited her modest farmhouse weekly, each time increasing the pressure while maintaining the facade of benevolent concern. They spoke of her isolation, the difficulty of managing land without a man's guidance, and the uncertainty that would surely overtake her children's futures. When she continued to refuse their offers, strange accidents began plaguing her livestock. Prize sheep were found dead in fields that had been secure the night before, their bodies bearing wounds that local veterinarians struggled to explain. The deaths among resistant landowners followed patterns that seemed almost orchestrated in their timing and impact. William Hartwell, who had organized his neighbors to collectively reject the royal offers, suffered a fatal fall from his barn loft just days before a planned meeting with Norfolk's Member of Parliament. The coroner ruled it accidental death, noting the presence of ale on the victim's breath, but neighbors whispered about the strange men who had been seen lurking near the Hartwell property in the weeks before the tragedy. Dr. Samuel Morrison, the local physician who had begun documenting what he termed unusual mortality rates among the holdout farmers, died of sudden illness after consuming what witnesses described as perfectly normal breakfast fare. The transformation of these deaths into local folklore served the royal purpose almost as effectively as the deaths themselves. Stories spread through Norfolk taverns about a curse that befell those who defied the crown, about ancient rites that no mortal family could hope to challenge. The more rational explanation lay in the sophisticated network of influence and intimidation that the royal household could deploy when necessary. Former military officers, discharged from service with generous pensions and flexible consciences, found employment as estate agents with broad discretionary powers. Local magistrates discovered that their own appointments and preferments depended upon maintaining harmonious relationships with royal interests. By autumn of 1863, the resistance had collapsed entirely. The final holdouts accepted terms that barely covered their relocation costs, loading their possessions onto carts that would carry them far from the ancestral lands where their families had been rooted for generations. The Sandringham estate purchase price of $220,000 represented a fraction of what the individual properties would have commanded in open market negotiations. But the royal acquisition had eliminated any semblance of fair market conditions. The scale of the displacement revealed the true scope of the royal ambition. $220,000 in 1862 purchasing power equated to approximately $26 million in modern currency, yet this represented merely the initial investment in what would become a generation-spanning project. 17 tenant families, comprising nearly 200 individual souls, found themselves scattered across England as the Norfolk landscape was reshaped to accommodate royal pleasure. 3. Suspicious deaths among resistant landowners created a climate of fear that proved more effective than any legal proceeding. The annual maintenance costs, carefully hidden from parliamentary oversight, would eventually reach $2.3 million per year as the estate expanded to accommodate increasingly elaborate royal entertainments. Most tellingly, by 1870, 89% of the original Norfolk families who had worked the land for centuries were no longer present on their ancestral territories. The architectural plans for the new Sandringham house were drawn over maps that still bore the names of displaced families, their former homes marked for demolition with red ink that seemed almost sacrificial in its symbolism. The foundation stones were laid upon soil that had been worked by generations of Norfolk farmers, their labor and loyalty ultimately meaning nothing in the face of royal desire. The prince had secured his Norfolk paradise, but the methods employed to acquire it cast shadows that would darken the estate for generations to come. The local parish registers, maintained with ecclesiastical precision through centuries of births, deaths, and marriages, began showing curious gaps during the acquisition period. Entire family lines simply vanished from the historical record, as if the royal purchase had erased not just their presence, but their very existence from Norfolk memory. Whether through deliberate manipulation or the natural consequence of mass displacement, the documentary evidence suggested that Sandringham's transformation had consumed more than just land and buildings. The ancient woodlands surrounding Sandringham had witnessed more carnage than any battlefield, though these deaths were celebrated rather than mourned. The transformation of Norfolk's natural landscape into Britain's premier killing ground began with scientific precision that would have impressed military strategists. Prince Edward VII's vision extended far beyond acquiring property. He intended to engineer an ecosystem designed solely for the methodical slaughter of wildlife on an industrial scale. The first wave of ecological destruction targeted the predator species that had maintained natural balance for millennia. Head gamekeeper William Bland arrived in 1863 with instructions that read more like military orders than conservation guidelines. His initial surveys cataloged every fox den, badger set, and birds of prey nesting site within the estate boundaries. The subsequent extermination campaign employed poison, traps, and systematic hunting that eliminated entire species from the Sandringham landscape within a single breeding season. Local naturalists documented the complete disappearance of red kites, which had soared above Norfolk for centuries, their distinctive cries falling silent by the winter of 1864. The artificial abundance that replaced this natural ecosystem required constant intervention and increasingly sophisticated manipulation. Gamekeepers maintained detailed ledgers that recorded the importation of tens of thousands of pheasants, partridges, and other game birds bred specifically for royal shooting parties. These exotic populations, raised in captivity and released into unfamiliar territory, created ecological chaos that rippled through the entire food chain. Native plant species, unprepared for the intensive grazing and ground disturbance caused by unnaturally dense bird populations, began disappearing from estate woodlands that had supported diverse flora since the Norman conquest. The mechanization of death reached its pinnacle during the reign of King George V, whose appetite for slaughter transformed Sandringham shoots into carefully choreographed massacres. The famous diary entry recording his personal kill count of 39 pheasants, 5 rabbits, 2 woodcock, and 1 partridge on a single December morning in 1913 captured only a fraction of the daily carnage. Beaters, recruited from local villages desperate for employment, drove terrified birds toward the royal guns in waves that darkened the Norfolk sky. The sound of constant gunfire during shooting season created an acoustic environment so alien to natural wildlife that surviving species began exhibiting behaviors that confused even experienced naturalists. Photography from the era revealed scenes that bordered on the surreal. Formal portraits showed smiling royalty posed behind mountains of feathered corpses, arranged with the same attention to detail, typically reserved for state banquets. The Prince Consort Albert, despite his reputation for enlightened thinking, personally oversaw the installation of mechanical bird traps that could capture and kill hundreds of songbirds simultaneously. These devices, camouflaged among the estate's ornamental gardens, operated continuously throughout breeding seasons, ensuring that even species with no game value face systematic elimination if they competed for resources with royal quarry. The scale of the killing defied comprehension even by the standards of Victorian excess. By 1900, annual shooting records documented the slaughter of over 30,000 individual birds during the traditional winter season alone, with additional kills throughout spring and summer months that went largely unrecorded. The construction of specialized game larders, buildings designed specifically for hanging and processing thousands of carcasses, required architectural innovation, typically associated with industrial food production. Local taxidermists found themselves overwhelmed by royal commissions that demanded permanent preservation of particularly impressive killing sprees, their workshops becoming monuments to recreational extinction. The ecological consequences extended far beyond the targeted game species. Gamekeepers' poison campaigns against foxes and other predators contaminated water sources throughout the estate, creating die-offs among amphibian populations that had thrived in Norfolk. Wetlands for millennia. The systematic destruction of hedgerows to create clear shooting lanes eliminated nesting sites and food sources for countless species, while the introduction of non-native plants to provide cover for game birds crowded out indigenous flora that supported native insect populations. Estate records revealed the true scope of environmental manipulation required to maintain this artificial killing field. 30,000 game birds slaughtered annually during peak shooting seasons represented only the documented kills, with additional unlicensed hunting and pest control operations raising the actual death toll significantly higher. The complete extinction of 7 native bird species within estate boundaries by 1920 marked an ecological catastrophe that received no contemporary recognition or concern. Gamekeepers employed 23 different types of poison to eliminate predators, creating a chemical legacy that persisted in estate soils for generations. The construction of 45 specialized shooting stands throughout the woodlands required the destruction of over 200 acres of ancient forest, while the importation of 156 tons of specialized feed annually to maintain artificially high game populations disrupted natural foraging patterns across the entire region. The nocturnal sounds that began emerging from Sandringham's woodlands during this period sparked local folklore that persisted well into the 20th century. Villagers reported hearing calls and cries from species that had supposedly been eliminated from the estate, leading some to whisper about ghostly flocks seeking vengeance for their extermination. The more rational explanation lay in the acoustic confusion created by introducing foreign bird species whose vocalizations were unfamiliar to Norfolk residents. Pheasants imported from Asia produced sounds that resembled human screams when heard at distance, while their mating calls during breeding season created an otherworldly chorus that echoed through foggy Norfolk nights. The transformation reached completion during the reign of George VI, when even the pretense of traditional hunting gave way to mechanized efficiency. Automatic feeding systems ensured maximum bird populations for royal shoots, while sophisticated breeding programs produced game birds so domesticated they barely attempted escape when released. The ancient balance between predator and prey that had shaped Norfolk ecosystems for centuries disappeared entirely, replaced by an artificial environment where death served no purpose beyond royal entertainment. The legacy of this ecological engineering project extended far beyond Sandringham's boundaries, establishing precedents for land management that prioritized aristocratic pleasure over environmental stewardship throughout Britain. Behind the green baize doors of Sandringham, a parallel world existed where loyalty was purchased with silence, and indiscretion carried lethal consequences. The servant hierarchy at the Norfolk estate operated according to rules that bore little resemblance to conventional domestic employment, creating a caste system where proximity to royal secrets determined both privilege and peril. Those who worked in the family's private quarters understood that their survival depended not on competence or dedication, but on their ability to become functionally blind and deaf to the activities unfolding around them. Mary Fitzgerald arrived at Sandringham in the spring of 1952 as an under-housemaid, her references impeccable, and her need for employment desperate following her father's death in a Manchester factory accident. The training she received during her first weeks bore no resemblance to the domestic instruction offered at other grand houses. Senior staff emphasized the critical importance of selective memory, demonstrating how certain conversations were to be forgotten immediately, while others required detailed documentation in private logs that disappeared into locked strongboxes each evening. The housekeeping staff learned to clean rooms without acknowledging what they had seen, polishing away evidence of activities that officially had never occurred. The personnel structure at Sandringham revealed patterns that defied normal domestic logic. Positions in the family wings carried salaries triple those of similar roles at other royal residences. Yet, these coveted appointments rarely lasted longer than 18 months. Exit interviews were conducted not by estate managers, but by men whose backgrounds suggested military or intelligence training, their questions focusing less on workplace satisfaction than on specific memories and potential indiscretions. Former employees who departed under amicable circumstances received generous severance packages, accompanied by comprehensive non-disclosure agreements that extended decades beyond their service and covered not only their direct experiences, but any speculation or interpretation of events they might have witnessed. The curious mortality patterns among former Sandringham staff became apparent only when viewed across multiple decades. James Rothwell, who had served as valet to King George VI during the war years, died in a London traffic accident 3 days after announcing his intention to write memoirs about royal life. The timing seemed coincidental until similar patterns emerged among other former employees who had entertained publishing projects. Agnes Cromwell, whose 20 years as head cook had provided intimate access to private family gatherings, suffered fatal food poisoning from a restaurant meal shortly after meeting with a literary agent about her proposed cookbook featuring royal recipes and anecdotes. The physical architecture of Sandringham itself seemed designed to facilitate surveillance and control over the domestic staff. Service corridors contained acoustic properties that allowed conversations to be monitored from central listening posts, while the strategic placement of mirrors and glass panels created sightlines that made genuine privacy impossible for employees. The staff quarters featured locks that could be overridden from a master panel in the estate manager's office, ensuring that personal belongings and private correspondence remained subject to inspection at any time. These design elements, initially attributed to Victorian efficiency, revealed more sinister purposes when examined in the context of staff control and information management. The recruitment process for sensitive positions involved background investigations that extended far beyond normal employment screening. Prospective employees found their family members approached by ostensible market researchers or census takers who asked detailed questions about financial pressures, political opinions, and personal vulnerabilities that could later be exploited to ensure compliance. Single mothers, individuals with gambling debts, and those supporting elderly relatives received particular attention from royal recruiters who understood that desperation created more reliable silence than mere contractual obligations. The scale of staff control operations at Sandringham revealed the true scope of royal paranoia about domestic security. Between 1950 and 2000, the estate employed 847 different individuals in various service roles, yet annual turnover rates reached 23%, triple the national average for comparable domestic positions. The comprehensive silence agreements offered to departing employees averaged $50,000 per person, representing millions in hush money distributed over 5 decades. Investigation into the subsequent fates of former staff revealed that 12 individuals died under unexplained circumstances within 5 years of leaving royal service, while comprehensive personnel records from sensitive periods, including the entire month of December 1936 during the abdication crisis, remained mysteriously absent from estate archives. The electronic surveillance systems installed throughout Sandringham during the Cold War period extended far beyond normal security measures. Staff members discovered listening devices concealed in their personal quarters, while telephone calls from estate phones were monitored and recorded regardless of whether they involved official business. The laundry facilities contained hidden cameras that captured not only the handling of royal garments, but private conversations among employees during their work shifts. These surveillance measures created an atmosphere where normal human interaction became impossible, transforming the staff community into a collection of isolated individuals who feared their colleagues as potential informants. The training materials provided to new employees included psychological conditioning techniques that would have been familiar to intelligence operatives. Staff learned to compartmentalize their memories, storing official duties in mental categories separate from any observations about royal behavior or private activities. They practiced responding to hypothetical questions from journalists, investigators, or curious outsiders with predetermined phrases that revealed nothing while appearing cooperative. The most effective employees developed an almost supernatural ability to be present, yet absent, performing their duties while maintaining cognitive blindness to anything beyond their immediate responsibilities. The phenomenon of vanishing staff members became sufficiently common to generate its own folklore among Norfolk villagers. Workers who asked too many questions or showed excessive curiosity about areas beyond their assigned duties simply disappeared from their positions without notice, their quarters cleaned out, and their presence erased from staff rosters as if they had never existed. Official explanations cited family emergencies or sudden opportunities elsewhere, but the pattern suggested more deliberate intervention in cases where employees had accessed information deemed too sensitive for civilian consciousness. The survival strategies developed by long-term Sandringham staff resembled those employed by prisoners or intelligence agents operating in hostile territory. They learned to communicate through subtle gestures and coded conversations, sharing warnings about dangerous topics or forbidden areas without explicit acknowledgement of the threats they faced. The royal family's beloved Christmas traditions at Sandringham concealed gatherings that shaped British policy through decidedly unconstitutional means. While newspaper photographers captured heartwarming images of the Windsors attending Christmas morning service at St. Mary Magdalene Church, the estate's guest registers told a different story about who truly shared the holiday festivities. The carefully curated public narrative of wholesome family celebrations masked a decades-long tradition of clandestine political summits disguised as seasonal social gatherings. The transformation of Christmas at Sandringham into a shadow diplomatic venue began during the reign of Edward VII, whose appetite for international intrigue matched his legendary enthusiasm for personal pleasure. The king discovered that holiday invitations provided perfect cover for hosting individuals whose presence in Britain required careful concealment from parliamentary oversight. Arms dealers, foreign intelligence operatives, and financial speculators found themselves seated at the royal Christmas table, their backgrounds sanitized through elaborate cover stories that portrayed them as European nobility or distinguished academics rather than the merchants of violence and influence they actually were. The guest accommodations at Sandringham during these holiday gatherings revealed the true nature of the assembled company. The estate's correspondence files, archived in temperature-controlled vaults beneath the main house, documented requests for specialized security arrangements that went far beyond normal royal protection protocols. Certain guests required accommodations that could withstand small explosives, while others needed communications equipment capable of reaching encrypted networks spanning multiple continents. The Christmas of 1908 saw the installation of a temporary telegraph station powerful enough to contact imperial outposts in India and Africa, officially described as facilitating seasonal greetings to colonial administrators, but actually enabling real-time coordination of military operations in the northwest frontier. The dining arrangements during these gatherings followed protocols that seemed designed to facilitate conspiracy rather than conversation. Seating charts preserved in royal archives revealed careful positioning of guests whose official governments maintained hostile relations, allowing for informal negotiations that could never occur through diplomatic channels. The Christmas dinner of 1913 brought together representatives from German arms manufacturers, British Admiralty officials, and Ottoman military advisors, whose subsequent conversations would influence naval procurement decisions affecting the approaching European conflict. The elaborate musical entertainment that followed these meals provided acoustic cover for private discussions that shaped imperial policy in ways that Parliament would never know. Prince Philip's arrival at Sandringham brought new dimensions to these clandestine holiday traditions. His extensive network of European contacts, developed during his peripatetic royal youth, provided access to intelligence operatives and arms dealers whose services proved invaluable during the Cold War period. The Christmas gatherings of the 1960s included figures whose presence would have scandalized the British public had their identities become known. Dmitry Kozlov, officially described as a cultural attaché from the Soviet embassy, spent 3 consecutive Christmas holidays at Sandringham, while simultaneously coordinating arms sales to African liberation movements through intermediaries seated at the same dinner table. The estate's communication systems during these periods rivaled those of major government facilities. Technical specifications preserved in Ministry of Defense archives revealed that Sandringham possessed encrypted radio equipment capable of bypassing normal diplomatic channels, enabling direct communication between royal guests and their principals without Foreign Office oversight. The installation of these systems, completed under the cover of routine modernization projects, created a parallel diplomatic infrastructure that operated entirely outside constitutional constraints on foreign policy formation. The scale of these shadow diplomatic operations revealed the true extent of royal involvement in international affairs. Between 1950 and 1990, Christmas guest lists at Sandringham included 47 individuals, subsequently identified as intelligence operatives from 12 different nations, their presence concealed through elaborate diplomatic covers. The estate's specialized communication equipment enabled 156 encrypted transmissions during holiday periods, bypassing normal Foreign Office protocols and creating direct channels between European royalty and shadow networks spanning the globe. Documentation recovered from Czech intelligence archives identified 8 specific policy decisions that originated from informal negotiations conducted during Sandringham Christmas gatherings, including arms sales agreements worth over 200 million and territorial concessions that affected post-colonial boundaries in Africa and Asia. The nocturnal activities at Sandringham during these holiday gatherings generated persistent local folklore about strange lights and mysterious aircraft movements above the Norfolk countryside. Villagers reported seeing unusual flight patterns during Christmas week, with aircraft approaching the estate from directions that suggested origins outside normal commercial or military routes. The rational explanation lay in the covert transportation requirements of guests whose presence in Britain required concealment from hostile intelligence services. Private aircraft, often bearing false registrations and following routes designed to avoid radar detection, delivered passengers whose identities remained hidden even from airport authorities through diplomatic immunity arrangements that stretched legal precedents to their breaking point. The tradition of Boxing Day shoots provided additional opportunities for private negotiations away from the potential surveillance that even Sandringham's secure facilities might harbor. The combination of noise from shotgun fire, the dispersed nature of hunting parties, and the outdoor setting created ideal conditions for conversations that required absolute privacy. Intelligence intercepts from the 1970s, declassified decades later through Freedom of Information requests, revealed that several major arms deals were finalized during these ostensibly recreational activities, with handshake agreements worth hundreds of millions concluded between shots at pheasant coveys. The documentary evidence for these activities emerged through the patient work of investigative journalists who spent years correlating guest lists with subsequent international events. The Christmas gathering of 1982 brought together South African military procurement officials with British defense contractors just months before major weapons shipments violated international sanctions against the apartheid regime. The careful timing of these meetings, disguised as social obligations rather than business negotiations, provided legal deniability while facilitating transactions that normal diplomatic channels could never have accommodated. The gradual revelation of these activities created profound discomfort within intelligence. Communities that had long depended on royal discretion to facilitate operations requiring constitutional flexibility. The Sandringham Christmas traditions represented a shadow foreign policy apparatus that operated entirely outside democratic oversight, transforming seasonal celebrations into mechanisms for international conspiracy that shaped global events through drawing room conversations and hunting lodge handshakes. The grounds of Sandringham contained more than formal gardens and ancient trees. They harbored secrets that successive generations of Windsors had literally covered with earth. The discovery began with routine maintenance in the spring of 1987, when groundskeepers attempting to install a new irrigation system encountered resistance that their equipment could not penetrate. What they initially assumed to be bedrock or ancient foundations proved far more disturbing when excavation revealed a carefully constructed burial chamber containing remains that bore no resemblance to any known Windsor family interment. The unauthorized archaeological investigation that followed, conducted by estate workers sworn to absolute secrecy, uncovered evidence of systematic concealment spanning decades. The skeletal remains showed signs of recent burial, their clothing fragments bearing manufacturer labels from the 1960s and 1970s rather than the antiquated fabrics expected from historical graves. Dental work visible in several skulls employed techniques and materials that placed the deaths well within the 20th century, while carbon dating of bone fragments confirmed that these individuals had died within living memory rather than during some distant historical period. The pattern of discoveries expanded as groundskeepers, now acutely aware of what lay beneath Sandringham's manicured surface, began noticing subtle irregularities in terrain that suggested additional burial sites. Depressions in the landscape that had been attributed to natural settling revealed geometric precision when mapped systematically, while ground-penetrating radar equipment, ostensibly brought in to locate broken drainage pipes, detected metallic objects buried at depths suggesting deliberate concealment rather than accidental loss. The estate's insistence on conducting all excavation work through private contractors rather than engaging established archaeological firms raised questions about institutional knowledge of what lay hidden beneath the Norfolk soil. The underground infrastructure discovered during these excavations defied any rational connection to normal estate operations. Concrete tunnels, reinforced with steel supports and equipped with ventilation systems, extended from the main house toward outbuildings that appeared innocuous from surface observation. The construction quality and materials suggested military engineering expertise, while the sophisticated drainage and electrical systems indicated sustained use rather than abandoned wartime installations. Maps recovered from estate archives showed no indication of these subterranean networks, suggesting that their construction had been deliberately excluded from official documentation. The most disturbing discoveries emerged from chambers that had clearly been designed for human occupation under circumstances that precluded voluntary residence. Reinforced rooms beneath the stable complex contained restraint systems bolted into reinforced walls, while ventilation shafts terminated in concealed openings that provided air circulation without revealing the chamber's existence to surface observation. The presence of recent mechanical modifications, including electric lighting systems and modern plumbing connections, indicated that these facilities had remained operational well into the contemporary era, rather than representing historical curiosities from darker periods of royal history. The chemical analysis of soil samples from burial sites revealed contamination patterns that suggested systematic destruction of evidence on an industrial scale. Traces of accelerants and high-temperature combustion residues indicated that substantial quantities of organic material had been incinerated at locations throughout the estate grounds, while chemical signatures consistent with document destruction appeared in concentrations that implied decades of sustained burning operations. The discovery of melted metal fragments, including what appeared to be dental fillings and jewelry components, suggested that these fire pits had consumed more than paper records. Estate employment records revealed suspicious gaps in documentation that corresponded precisely with periods when major excavation or construction projects had occurred on the grounds. Workers hired for specific projects often disappeared from payroll records immediately upon completion of their assignments, while the specialized nature of their skills, including demolition expertise and concrete work, suggested activities far beyond normal maintenance requirements. The insistence on employing only foreign workers, typically from Eastern European countries with limited extradition treaties, created additional barriers to subsequent investigation or testimony about the true nature of their assignments. The scale of concealment operations at Sandringham revealed a systematic effort to hide evidence that spanned multiple decades and required substantial resources. Ground-penetrating radar identified 7 distinct unmarked burial sites scattered across the estate grounds, their locations chosen to avoid areas subject to routine maintenance or public access. The subterranean tunnel network extended 2.3 miles from the main house, connecting to outbuildings and concealed chambers that served purposes unrelated to estate management. The last official archaeological survey in 1963 was abruptly terminated after 3 weeks, with all findings classified under official secrets legislation that prevented their publication or archive storage. Soil analysis detected 156 tons of ash and organic debris buried throughout the grounds since 1970, representing destruction operations that exceeded the estate's documented waste disposal by orders of magnitude. 3 government officials who gained access to estate excavation records died within weeks of their visits, their deaths attributed to natural causes despite the suspicious timing and their previously excellent health. The nocturnal phenomena reported by local residents during periods of intensive excavation work generated folklore that persisted throughout Norfolk communities for generations. Villagers described strange lights emanating from the estate grounds during new moon periods, accompanied by mechanical sounds that suggested heavy machinery operating in areas where no construction projects had been officially announced. These accounts, dismissed by authorities as rural superstition, gained credibility when electromagnetic anomalies were detected by amateur radio operators whose equipment registered unusual signal patterns originating from Sandringham grounds during precisely the periods when excavation work was believed to be occurring. The systematic nature of the concealment efforts suggested coordination at levels that extended far beyond estate management capabilities. The specialized equipment required for deep excavation and concrete work implied access to military or intelligence resources, while the sophisticated chemical destruction of evidence required expertise, typically associated with covert operations rather than domestic security concerns. The timing of major concealment projects often coincided with periods of political instability or royal family crises, suggesting that sensitive materials were being eliminated during moments when public attention was focused elsewhere. The discovery of personal effects among buried remains provided the most chilling evidence of Sandringham's hidden history. Identity documents, jewelry, and clothing fragments suggested that the victims had come from diverse backgrounds and nationalities, while the condition of the remains indicated that death had not always been swift or merciful. Sandringham's influence extended far beyond its ornate gates, creating a web of complicity that ensnared local officials, media figures, and law enforcement in a system of mutual dependency that transformed the Norfolk countryside into a protective buffer zone around royal secrets. The estate's relationship with regional authorities revealed patterns of coordination that suggested decades of careful cultivation, transforming ostensibly independent institutions into extensions of royal will through a combination of financial incentives, career advancement, and carefully applied pressure. The Norfolk Constabulary's handling of incidents involving the royal estate demonstrated a level of preferential treatment that bordered on complete abdication of law enforcement responsibility. Police reports from the 1970s onward contained curious gaps that coincided precisely with periods of royal residence at Sandringham, while incident logs showed systematic classification of events that would have triggered major investigations if they had occurred elsewhere in the county. Detective Inspector Harold Weatherby, whose 20-year career with Norfolk Police included 5 years assigned specifically to estate liaison duties, maintained private records that documented over 40 incidents involving potential criminal activity that were either dismissed without investigation or transferred to unspecified government authorities who left no subsequent paper trail. The career trajectories of local officials revealed how proximity to Sandringham affairs could either elevate or destroy professional prospects with equal efficiency. Magistrate Patricia Thornfield found herself appointed to increasingly prestigious positions. After demonstrating discretion in handling cases involving estate employees, her judicial advancement correlating directly with her willingness to accept official explanations that strained credibility. Conversely, County Coroner Dr. Michael Harrison experienced a precipitous decline in his professional standing after questioning the circumstances surrounding several deaths of former Sandringham workers. His attempts to conduct thorough investigations met with administrative obstacles that effectively prevented him from accessing critical evidence or witnesses. The local media landscape underwent gradual transformation that reflected Sandringham's growing influence over information flow throughout Norfolk. The Eastern Daily Press, historically an independent voice for regional concerns, experienced changes in ownership and editorial direction that coincided with increased coverage of royal activities and decreased investigation into estate-related controversies. Journalists who pursued stories involving Sandringham found themselves reassigned to less sensitive beats, while freelance reporters discovered that their sources suddenly became unavailable and their access to public records mysteriously restricted through bureaucratic procedures that had not previously existed. The financial relationships between Sandringham and local institutions created dependencies that effectively compromised their independence while maintaining the appearance of normal civic function. The estate's charitable contributions to Norfolk hospitals, schools, and cultural organizations followed patterns that suggested strategic investment in community loyalty rather than philanthropic impulse. Recipients of royal generosity found themselves subject to implicit expectations about discretion and cooperation that were never explicitly stated, but clearly understood by all parties involved. The recruitment and training of Norfolk constabulary officers assigned to estate duties revealed the systematic creation of a specialized force that operated according to different protocols than normal police work. These officers received additional compensation packages that included housing subsidies, educational opportunities for their children, and pension enhancements that created powerful incentives for loyalty to royal interests over public service obligations. Their training emphasized the critical importance of operational security and discretion, with specialized instruction in recognizing situations that required immediate consultation with unspecified higher authorities, rather than standard police procedures. The transformation of local government functions to accommodate royal needs became apparent through examination of planning permissions, licensing decisions, and regulatory enforcement patterns around the Sandringham estate. Applications for construction projects that might compromise estate privacy were systematically denied through bureaucratic processes that cited regulations seldom enforced elsewhere in the county, while modifications to public roads, utility services, and communication infrastructure received expedited approval when they served royal convenience. The Norfolk County Council's handling of Freedom of Information requests involving estate-related matters revealed delays and exemptions that suggested coordination with legal authorities who possessed broader powers to restrict public access to government documents. The influence network extended into unexpected areas of civic life, including the appointment of church officials, school administrators, and even volunteer organization leaders whose roles might provide access to information about estate activities or community attitudes toward the royal presence. The selection process for these positions increasingly emphasized candidates whose backgrounds included military or government service, suggesting preference for individuals already familiar with institutional loyalty and confidentiality requirements. The statistical evidence revealed the scope of institutional capture that Sandringham had achieved throughout Norfolk's civic infrastructure. Between 1970 and 2000, Norfolk Constabulary classified 127 incident reports involving estate-related activities under secrecy provisions, typically reserved for national security matters, preventing public access to information about potential criminal activity on royal property. Police officers assigned to estate liaison duties received compensation packages averaging 40% above standard rates for comparable positions, creating powerful financial incentives for compliance with unofficial protocols that prioritized royal privacy over law enforcement obligations. The Norfolk County Council processed 89 planning applications affecting areas adjacent to Sandringham during the same period, with approval rates for projects that enhanced estate security reaching 100%, while applications that might compromise royal privacy faced rejection rates of 94%. Local media coverage of estate-related controversies declined by 78% after 1985, despite increasing public interest in royal affairs during the same period. 5 investigative journalists who pursued stories involving Sandringham activities left their positions within 18 months of beginning their research, citing career opportunities that took them far from Norfolk. The mechanisms of influence operated through networks that remained largely invisible to public observation, while maintaining effectiveness that suggested professional coordination. Former military and intelligence officers found employment in senior positions throughout Norfolk's institutional hierarchy, their presence creating informal communication channels that enabled rapid coordination when situations required collective response to protect royal interests. The psychological impact of this systematic influence extended throughout Norfolk communities, creating an atmosphere where questioning royal activities became synonymous with challenging the entire structure of local power and employment. Residents learned to recognize the boundaries of acceptable curiosity, understanding that certain topics and areas of inquiry carried professional and social consequences that extended far beyond their immediate circumstances. The transformation was so gradual and comprehensive that most participants remained unaware of their role in a larger system of institutional capture, believing themselves to be following normal procedures while actually serving as components in a vast protection mechanism that insulated Sandringham from any meaningful external oversight or accountability. As Elizabeth II aged, the burden of maintaining Sandringham's darkest secrets grew heavier, culminating in a desperate attempt to control her legacy through the systematic destruction of evidence that had accumulated over 7 decades of Windsor rule. The final years of her reign witnessed unprecedented activity at the Norfolk estate, with operations that bore more resemblance to intelligence agency document destruction than routine royal household management. The Queen, whose public image emphasized duty and continuity, privately orchestrated the elimination of records that could have rewritten the historical understanding of the British monarchy's role in international affairs and domestic governance. The transformation began in earnest following Prince Philip's death in April 2021, when estate workers observed unusual activity in sections of Sandringham that had remained sealed throughout Elizabeth's reign. Industrial shredding equipment, delivered under cover of darkness by contractors whose credentials remained unverified through normal security channels, operated continuously for weeks in basement areas that had been declared structurally unsound for public access. The constant mechanical grinding echoed through the estate's foundations, creating vibrations that staff members felt in their quarters throughout the night, while the acrid smell of burning paper and chemical accelerants permeated the Norfolk air, despite sophisticated ventilation systems designed to conceal such operations. The Queen's personal involvement in these destruction activities marked a dramatic departure from her lifelong pattern of delegating sensitive matters to trusted subordinates. Estate employees reported seeing the monarch herself, despite her advancing age and mobility limitations, personally reviewing documents before consigning them to destruction, her gloved hands trembling as she sorted through materials that spanned decades of accumulated secrets. Her insistence on being present during the most sensitive phases of the operation suggested either profound distrust of her own staff or recognition that certain knowledge was too dangerous to share, even with those who had devoted their lives to royal service. The renovation projects that accompanied this destruction campaign followed patterns that suggested concealment rather than preservation as their primary objective. Rooms that had served as private offices and informal meeting spaces found themselves sealed behind false walls or converted to storage areas that discouraged future investigation, while basement chambers underwent concrete reinforcement that would prevent any subsequent archaeological examination. The official explanation cited structural improvements and modernization, but the specific areas targeted for modification corresponded precisely to locations where the most sensitive historical activities had occurred. The midnight meetings that became routine during Elizabeth's final years at Sandringham brought together individuals whose presence violated every protocol of royal security and constitutional propriety. Intelligence officials, foreign operatives, and financial advisors arrived through channels that bypassed normal diplomatic procedures, their consultations focusing on damage assessment and legacy protection rather than ongoing policy concerns. These gatherings, conducted in rooms equipped with sophisticated electronic countermeasures, that prevented any form of surveillance or recording addressed questions about which secrets could survive the transition to a new reign and which required immediate elimination. The scale of destruction operations during Elizabeth's final years revealed the true extent of materials that the monarchy deemed too dangerous for historical preservation. Industrial shredding operations consumed 89 tons of documentation between 2019 and 2022, with the destroyed materials including financial records, correspondence files, and photographic archives spanning the entire length of Elizabeth's reign. Estate renovation expenses during the same period reached $4.7 million, with the majority of funds allocated to projects that enhanced security and privacy, rather than historical preservation or public access. 34 longtime staff members accepted early retirement packages that included enhanced pension provisions and comprehensive non-disclosure agreements extending beyond their natural lifespans. 6 rooms in the main house were sealed indefinitely and cited for structural concerns, despite engineering reports that indicated no safety issues requiring such drastic measures. The destruction timeline accelerated dramatically after February 2022, when Elizabeth made her final public appearance, suggesting that preparations for posthumous security had entered their most critical phase. The technological sophistication of the destruction operations impressed even experienced intelligence professionals who observed the process through unofficial channels. Document destruction equipment employed techniques typically reserved for classified government materials, with multiple stages of shredding, chemical treatment, and high-temperature incineration that rendered reconstruction impossible even with advanced forensic methods. Electronic storage devices underwent degaussing procedures that eliminated all magnetic signatures, while computer hard drives were physically destroyed through industrial crushing, before being dissolved in acid baths that left no recoverable traces. The nocturnal phenomena reported by Norfolk residents during these final destruction phases generated local folklore about restless spirits demanding justice for long-concealed crimes. Villagers described unusual atmospheric disturbances above Sandringham, including electromagnetic anomalies that disrupted radio and television reception throughout the surrounding countryside. The rational explanation lay in the sophisticated electronic countermeasures employed during sensitive operations, with signal jamming equipment designed to prevent any form of electronic surveillance or communication that might compromise the destruction activities. The Queen's insistence on spending her final Christmas at Sandringham took on profound significance when viewed in the context of these elimination operations. Her determination to be present at the estate during the holiday period, despite health concerns that had limited her public appearances throughout 2022, suggested a personal need to oversee the completion of projects that would determine her historical legacy. The traditional Christmas morning service at St. Mary Magdalene Church became a poignant finale to decades of public performance that had concealed activities requiring such desperate measures to prevent posthumous revelation. The coordination required for these operations extended far beyond the capabilities of normal estate management, involving specialists whose expertise suggested military or intelligence backgrounds. The timing of various destruction phases correlated with periods of reduced media attention and political distraction, indicating strategic planning that considered broader, public attention patterns rather than simply estate convenience. The sophisticated logistics involved in moving equipment, personnel, and materials through rural Norfolk without attracting unwanted attention required coordination with local authorities whose cooperation had been cultivated over decades of careful relationship management. The final phase of operations, completed in the weeks before Elizabeth's death, focused on eliminating any trace of the destruction activities themselves, with equipment removal, site restoration, and personnel dispersal that left no evidence of the unprecedented campaign to control royal historical legacy through systematic elimination of inconvenient evidence.